let's move on to some reviews. And let's start with the Samsung S95B QD-OLED. Is it the TV of 2022? I hear you all cry out. It is a cracking TV. It's a stunning TV, especially when it comes to things like picture brightness and HDR and delivering that brightness on screen in terms of dynamic range. And also color. Color is obviously fantastic on this display. It's the way it's been designed. It's almost a true RGB display if you're looking at things in a non-technical way. So basically, in terms of color volume, it's giving you color volume that a WRGB OLED, like I know LG, can't give you. And the difference is, very quickly, is WRGB uses a white pixel as well as RGB filters. They have to drive the white pixel to get the brightness. As soon as you start doing that and you reach a certain brightness, your colors then start to turn white because you don't have the volume. You don't have the necessary color brightness there at certain points. Whereas QD-OLED gets around that. It uses a blue light. It's a blue OLED. It then uses a quantum dot filter on top of that for red and green. So the blue light going through that filter, because of the purity, it gives you pure red and green energy. So you get your RGB, which means there's no white pixel driving that. And because they're so economical with power and so on, when it comes to quantum dot, you can actually drive them really quite high and you can get really good brightness, which is a big advantage when it comes to an OLED TV. It's always been an issue with OLED. I mean, OLED was developed back in the days of before HDR. We had SDR, you had plasma and LCD, and OLED was developed to come in at that point and take over from plasma with the benefits of, pixel level black and so on. And then HDR and 4K came along. I mean, plasma finished because it wasn't cost effective to make 4K panels with plasma technology, which is where OLED was going to step in. But then HDR really pushed the technology and almost killed OLED technology because of the brightness that was required. So that's why the original OLED TV from Samsung, I'm trying to remember the name of it now. It was the S something or other. Give me a second because I've got it in my notes. But anyway, it was a proper RGB OLED. The problem was lifespan was not great on them. They had lots of issues in terms of making the things, and it just wasn't viable commercially. And that's why Samsung dropped out of OLED, whereas LG developed the WRGB approach using the white pixel. So that's a little bit of history. So why is quantum dot or QD-OLED special? Well, it's because it can get the brightness, it can get the colors. Is it the best TV on the market? It comes very, very close. Very close. But there's another TV sitting next to me.
We've not seen the Sony yet, though.
Well, that's the TV that's sitting next to me.
Oh.
So the A95K from Sony uses exactly the same panel, but with Sony's approach to things. Now, let me just clarify what I mean by that, because Samsung are very much a populist brand, very popular because they make bright, shiny, very garish, colourful images on their TVs. They've always done that, and they're not so concerned about the audience that wants accuracy and who want to see things as it's intended to be seen. So Samsung have always produced what they think is a good picture rather than what people that make the content think. And there's always been that clash, but it's been very, very popular, their approach with the wider public who maybe don't understand what it is that they're seeing. They just see bright colors and a nice bright image and think that is what the TV is supposed to show them rather than accuracy. So in terms of accuracy, the S95B is fairly accurate now. It's had the 12.11 firmware added. It started off at 12.04, which is when we bought the TV, and Vincent HDTV Test flagged up that he thought the TV was being a little bit misleading if he used the non-industry standard window sizes to measure. We were able to verify that was the case. We used 8% windows, and the TV in filmmaker mode did not track correctly. But if you used the industry standard window, it did track correctly. And again, I'm going quickly over this. We'll get into more detail in the actual written review. But this firmware has corrected that in filmmaker mode. I've fully tested it with different window sizes. It now measures and it now tracks correctly in HDR the way it should do to the ST2084 standard, which it should do in terms of the correct response for HDR content. Now, let's get back to this. Is it the best TV out there? There's no such thing as a perfect TV. And I've seen a few accusations when we've discussed this TV in the past that we've been a bit down on it and we're not going with the whole fanfare that others out there are going with. And that's because we like to be balanced, we like to be fair, and we like to have the right information to hand before we then talk about a product and if it's worth your while buying that product, or if it does what it says on the tin. There was a lot of hype about this TV because of it using QD-OLED, and it is fantastic. There is no denying it. We are not being down on this TV at all. We're not being favourite towards LG or anything like that. We're just being balanced and we're being honest, and we're not blown away by the hype and the marketing that surrounds these things. So in those terms, it is a great TV. There are issues. So let me get the issues out of the way first of all, and then we can talk about the absolute positives, and there are some cracking positives here. So HDR gaming, it takes forever to set it up right. It's not tone mapping correctly, especially with HDR gaming. If you want to get into HDR gaming, you're going to spend quite some time trying to figure out how to get it to display the games properly where the tone mapping is done correctly, so it doesn't wash the image out and it doesn't clip detail away. There's plenty of videos online and all the rest of people who have figured out how to get around this. Rather than pushing in that direction, we're pushing Samsung for a fix on this. So hopefully Samsung will issue a fix for the game mode where it does track correctly in HDR, so you can do HDIG games and it will do the correct clip point, so then the game can tone map correctly and the console can tone map it. At the minute, the TV's trying to dynamically tone map, the console's tone mapping, it's a mess, and you're having to pick one or the other. So the advice at the minute is to manage this is try and set the settings within the console for 1000 nits, and then let the TV tone map, because dynamically tone mapping, you can't switch it off. It's one of the things that Samsung do, and they don't give you any access to actually bypass the dynamic tone mapping, which other manufacturers do. Panasonic have a professional mode where you can go in and tell the TV you just want it to clip naturally at its clip point, and then the other source can then, whatever you're using, can then tone map. So that's an issue. And again, it's overly bright. The tone mapping is there. It doesn't follow the 2084 standard. It's too bright. Color gamut auto setting. You would think, Jules, that if you set the color gamut to auto, it'll read the metadata of the content and will set the gamut size correctly. So if it's mastered at 2020 coordinates, it would set that correctly. If it's mastered at DCI P3, it would automatically set that. It doesn't.
So it's not picking it up?
It's not picking it up. It's not actually switching to the desired gamut size in terms of how the content was mastered. So again, that's an issue. It's something that Samsung can fix, hopefully, with firmware. Although don't go buying a set assuming that it will be fixed, because we've seen in the past that sometimes what seems like an easy fix hasn't been fixed. So again, fingers crossed that's something that they can look at. So in terms of picture quality, it's now accurate in filmmaker mode, but only in filmmaker mode if you want to watch movies and TV content as it was mastered and intended to be seen. The positives, it's a stunning HDR image. And I know Jules will pick up on this straight away because you've seen the master monitors in the studios and what those monitors are capable of doing. Now, they are £30,000, £40,000 to buy, because they have to do that 24 hours a day, 365 days a year in a professional environment. That's why they cost that much. The Samsung can do that. It can show up to 1,000 nits quite easily. There is still dynamic tone mapping going on behind the scenes, which is, it's not great, because if you can hit 1,000 nits,
you shouldn't need to do
any tone mapping. So, But again, Samsung want to add their flavor to the image, and it is still there. But in terms of when you put it side by side with the C2 and the G2, there is that little bit extra headroom there. You can see there's that little bit extra headroom. Things like the sun behind the clouds and so on, there's more detail there. It's more pronounced. It's that little bit brighter than the LG sitting next to it. Another downside is black levels. Now, black levels in a dim room when you're watching, not a problem. Same as the LG sitting next to it. Add some ambient light into the room, like behind, and this is something that I've mentioned before. There's no polarizing filter on the S95B with the way that the panel's made up that there is on the LG. And the LG looks black and inky black behind me there, whereas the Samsung has a light grey finish, almost like an old plasma would. When you switch the plasma off, you could see that the panel looked a light grey. Now, when there is light in the room and light hitting the screen, it does affect the black level slightly. So again, positioning of the panel is really important. We're not having a downer on this. It's the way the panel's made up. Just be aware you're going to have to make some compromises if you're using it in a bright room, whereas the LG screens and the Panasonic screens don't have that issue. 4 HDMI 2.1 inputs, 48 gigabits per second. The 4K HDR sources look amazing. There are a few issues with the upscaling. The video processing is not industry leading. It is Samsung processing, which means there is quite a bit of edge enhancement going on, a little bit of backdoor noise reduction going on that can take a little bit of fine detail away. Feed it a high quality source, those issues are not that bad, although some scenes where you've got a lot of detail, a lot of lines and so on, they can look a little bit over sharpened, which I think a lot of people are not going to worry about whatsoever. It's only going to be, the purists that are going to be worried about that. But yes, it can look just a little bit unnaturally over sharpened if you've got a bit of a purist eye to you. Otherwise, I think people are they're going to really like the picture quality. Gaming wise, like I said, they need to sort out the game stuff, because the game bar is really, really nice. It's a really nice feature. LG have got something similar on their sets where you can switch VRR on and off. You can manipulate the image how you want to do it. You can select how much input lag you want from fast, faster, and fastest in terms of what you're doing. You can add some interpolation on top of that without pushing the input lag higher than 20 milliseconds, which is great. If that's the kind of thing that you want to do, you want to take a little bit of judder or a little bit of smearing out of there, you can do that. You increase your input lag slightly, but not massively. The Tizen Smart TV is great. So all around, when it comes down to picture quality, it is really, really good. But it's not perfect. And the thing is, there's no such thing as a perfect TV. So there is a lot of hype around this TV. There's a lot of people pushing it, saying it's the greatest thing ever. I can see why that is the case. And I can see why people are pushing that way. But if you want a more balanced opinion, a more balanced look at it, it does some really, really good things really, really well. But as always with these things, it's about how you're going to use the TV, what you want to get out of the TV, and which one is going to suit your needs. And this is why I come back around to the Sony. If you are like myself and Jules and you're after accuracy, state-of-the-art video processing, good motion, and so on, the Sony is just that little step up. But then on the Sony, you only get 2 HDMI 2.1 inputs because it's using a MediaTek chip in there. And it has its foibles. So there's no perfect solution when it comes to this. It's what you need and what you want. And if you like the Samsung images that you see on their LCD TVs, this is kind of what you're getting on the S95B. You're just getting super inky blacks, no clouding, no issues with backlight bleed or anything like that. You're getting the best of OLED, and you're getting the best of the LCD picture quality, if that's what you like. If you want accuracy, stick around for the Sony review, and we'll get into it in a bit more detail. And of course, we've got all the comparisons coming up. So I've kind of gone into that a little bit more than I intended, but I think it's an important TV. It needs to be talked about. It needs to be discussed. At the end of the day, there's a lot of hype around this TV because it was the first of its kind to come out, and it is a very reasonable price point in terms of its entry level. But then again, the build quality is not great. It's a bit plasticky, but you've got to accept that because you're getting new technology at a decent price, basically, and they have to cut corners somewhere. It's still a nice design TV, and at the end of the day, you're going to set it up once at home, and you're probably never going to touch it again in terms of moving the TV, whereas I move the TVs every day, basically moving them around and so on. So I kind of notice that a bit more than others probably will. So anyway, the review will be up this week, probably tomorrow or Wednesday. Keep your eye open for the review. It goes into a lot more detail. I'll answer your questions in the thread there because we're really running out of time tonight. I wanted to answer some of them tonight. I will try and do that before we end. But head over to the thread on the review. I will spend a few days catching up with that thread and answering your questions in there. And like I say, we are not ever down on these things. We're never negative. We just like to be balanced, and sometimes that means highlighting issues that others maybe want to gloss over. So don't take it the wrong way. Just take it as you're getting an informed opinion, and this is why we've reached the opinion, because X, Y, Z, and does that match what you want from the product. But in terms of image quality, it's really, really good. Really, really good. And you haven't seen one, go see one. And see why people are hyping it the way they are, because I can see exactly why they're hyping it. It's impressive, really impressive. All the details in the review.